It is a great honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Professor Esther Duflo, who is the Abdul Latif Jamil Professor of Poverty Alleviation and Development Economics, as well as the founding director of the MIT Jamil Poverty Action Lab. 6 years after finishing her PhD, she was a full professor at MIT, and 2 years after that, the holder of an endowed chair. Not yet 40, Professor Duflo has already won an award recognizing her as an outstanding advisor to many young scholars who seek to join her important work. She has written numerous articles and 4 books, most recently with co-author Abhijit Banerjee, Poor Economics, a radical rethinking of the way to fight global poverty. Professor Duflo is a problem solver, working on some of the hardest and most pressing problems in the world. Like you, and like all wise problem solvers, she knows that the best solutions don't always necessarily require esoteric math. Sometimes, the most powerful solutions are simple and elegant. Professor Duflo has also won many noteworthy honors and distinctions, including a MacArthur Fellowship. She is also one of only 3 women thus far to win the John Bates Clark Award, given to an American economist under the age of 40 who is judged to have made the most significant contribution to economic thought and knowledge. She is also a winner of the Thomas C. Schelling Award, given each year to an individual whose remarkable intellectual work has had a transformative impact on public policy. Note the use of the past perfect tense in the phrase has had a transformative impact on public policy. That is an extraordinary phrase to use of one so young. All the other recipients of the Schelling Award were at least 3 decades older than Professor Duflo. We are, yes. We are indeed fortunate to have women such as Professor Duflo transforming the world, not only solving problems, but training, leading, and inspiring others to follow in her footsteps. It is my pleasure to present to you Professor Esther Duflo.
Good afternoon. So I realize I stand between you and what you're really interested in, so that's a bit of a difficult place to be in. Let me start with one thing. Let me start, if you have your parents next to you, just turn around and hug them. If you are not there, hug them mentally. I would like you to do that. Really, I mean it. We have been celebrating you, the contestant, and we're right. I want you to think about your parents. You're also here because of them. My parents, also my father is a mathematician, and one of my key goals in life was not to be a mathematician. It's not very difficult, it's not necessarily very easy when you're a girl in France who is decent at math, because there is, contrary to this country, very little thought that you might do anything than math if you're good at it, at least for, let's say, until you finish college. My mom is a doctor, and so my other key desire was not to be a doctor. And at the same time, I wanted to retain what was important to both of them, what I got from both of them, the rigor and the attention to detail that was fundamental in my father's approach to mathematics. By the way, he does algebra, which could hardly be more abstract. And also my mom's deep passion to try to make a difference in the life of many other people. So it took a little bit of stumbling to get there, and to some extent I found some way which honors a little bit of both of them and gives meaning to my life as well. So, and that's science against poverty. So let me give you a bit of background. This is some pictures from Egypt taken last year. Egypt is, I think to this day, the largest recipient of aid from the US. And in fact, if you took all the money that is given to Egypt every year, and you gave it to Africa instead, you would have enough money to give every African child under 5 $20. $20 will buy you a Bednets to protect the child against malaria, a set of the basic immunization, and there'll be a little bit of spare change for fertilizer for their parents or deworming the kid once a year. So clearly this is not the decision that as a country we're making or as a world we're making, but the question in a sense is whether this is good or bad. So very naturally you're thinking, well, this seems like it has to be bad. You know, we could help these kids, why aren't we doing it? And some very powerful voices in the debate, like Jeffrey Sachs, for example, would claim like this is really a disgrace. We should be helping these people because through aid, through sending money abroad from this country, we can help eradicating poverty. Other people, equally powerful in a sense in the debate, which you may have heard of, are Bill Easterly and Dambisa Moyo, who argue the exact opposite. They argue in a sense, this African girl is very lucky that all the money has gone to Egypt because aid doesn't help, it hurts, it creates lobbies and resources over which people can fight, and it creates more ill than good, and it prevents countries to find their own path. So that's the debate, the way it's sort of located, and people are kind of throwing these big ideas at each other. And looking at the one, it's a question that is a little bit difficult to answer. I'll give you one reason why it's difficult to answer it that way, whether aid will help or hurt. This is a graph showing the relationship between aid and income in Africa. The blue bars are the amount of money that was given of aid in billions over the years between 1960 and 2000. The red graph is the GDP per capita in a continent. And you can see that, well, aid has kept going up and up and up, and the GDP has not done very much. So from here, you could conclude that clearly help has been wasted. And this is what Bill Easterly would say. On the other hand, you don't know what would have happened to GDP without the aid. Maybe it would have gone down. That would be Sachs's argument. For that matter, maybe it would have gone up. We just don't know. We have no counterfactual. And not only we have no counterfactual, but we're not about to have one. So in a sense, posing the question in this broad sense is making sure that we can't answer it. We are talking today about solving these great problems, and that's good, but I think a lot of us who are here, professors, would say that one very important first step in solving the right problem is in asking the right question. And when you ask a question that is not very well defined, like what's the meaning of the entire universe, for example, not very well defined, we could specify it a bit more, you can't really get an answer. When you ask the question, is aid helping or hurting, likewise, you can't really answer it. And not only you can't really answer it, but it's not, in a sense, such a useful question. The useful question should really be not whether aid is good or bad, or has been good or bad, but how to make sure that any program that is designed to help the poor could be funded from the aid or could be funded by the developing country's own budget, how to make sure that these programs are effective. So the question is not has aid worked in the past? The question is how to address the key questions that are forbidding the poor people in poor countries to realize their potential. And then once we ask the question this way, we can really specify it. Instead of asking what's the ultimate cause of poverty in one go, we can say, like, how can we effectively fight diarrhea? How can we effectively fight malaria, etc.? So we take the big globe and we transform it into lots and lots of questions which maybe now are in focus, but which we have a chance to answer. And then we'll go back to the big question, what does it tell us about poverty in general? So let's see one question, how to stop malaria. That's a small, that's not such a small question. Malaria is pretty important. About almost 1 million people die of malaria every year. 91% of them are in Africa. And the vast majority are under the age of 5. So how we fight malaria, part of the answer has to do with technology, medical technology. We have to develop things that help either fighting the mosquitoes, preventing the mosquitoes to reproduce, or simply preventing them to bite us through bednets. So as of today, bednets are one of the technologies that is the most widespread to fight malaria. It's very simple. It put an insecticide-treated bed net between you and the mosquito. The mosquito doesn't bite you. If you don't have malaria, it won't give you malaria. If you have it, it will avoid transmitting to someone else. For these reasons, bed nets have what we call large externalities, which is if I have a bed net, that's good for me, but it's also good for you, because it will protect you against my parasite if I happen to have malaria. But so for this reason, subsidizing bed nets seems to be a very good idea. The question is, to what extent? Should we go all the way to giving them for free? So one argument is, yes, you should give them for free, because that way you can blanket the population and you'll get herd immunity from everybody being covered. But on the other hand, some people argue, well, you give them for free, and what happens is that people are using the bed net as fishing nets, not as a malaria net, which may be fine, but it's not going to do much for malaria. So there's this debate, and people are debating and debating and debating, and in all of these books on aid that you can find, there'll be anecdotes. I've met this, I went to this village and bed nets were given for free and people are so much healthier, and how can you possibly deny the great value of having a bed net for free, on the one hand. On the other hand, I went to this village and there was this factory that was providing bed nets, and then it was put out of business by the free bed net distribution, and everybody was unemployed, and in addition, nobody used the bed nets. How can you possibly send free bed nets to these communities? So this is the nature of the debate. As you may already have noticed, and will certainly as you become more and more aware to the world around you, you will see that a lot of the public debates are of this nature. They are made of ideology combined with anecdotes. That's not very helpful. We want to replace them with some facts. So it turns out that in this case, it seems that knowing what the facts are would not be particularly difficult. What you want to know whether you should give malaria for free or you should ask people to pay a little bit for them, are really three things. One is, if you give them for free, you're going to, of course, get a lot of people getting them. But if you start asking people to pay a little, are many people going to miss out, or are they going to purchase them? That's question one. Question two, when people get them for free, they have them, but are they going to use them effectively, or are they going to use them as fishing net? Question three, if I get a bed net for free once, am I discouraged to get the next net, or am I encouraged to get the next net? I could be discouraged because now I'm used to getting things for free and therefore I don't want to pay for them, or I could be encouraged because I feel that now I've learned the benefits of them. Those are very empirical questions. Those are not questions that we should just, like, whatever is on the top of our head, answer. So here's one way to answer them. This is research that was done by a woman called Pascaline Depas, who is a professor at Stanford. What she took is an area, and then in this area, you have various people, and you randomly select how much people need to pay for a bed net. So in this area, they were already selling bed nets in the pharmacy. So you go to some people and you give them a voucher for a free bed net, or for a partially subsidized bed net, or for actually a less subsidized bed net, but still subsidized. And what is very important here is to select randomly who gets what. The reason is that that's the only way to ensure that people who get the free bed nets are no different than people who had to pay for them. Once you do that, all you have to do is to compare what happens to the behavior of people who got free Bednet versus who had to pay for them. So this is the first question. If people must pay for Bednet, will they purchase them? So the Bednets were offered at various prices, all randomized, so people are similar. Then we can look at whether or not they go and get the Bednet. When the Bednet is free, everybody gets it. The full price of a Bednet is out there at $6, but whenever they have to pay for a Bednet, even only $3, a lot of people miss out on them. A lot of people don't get them. Because $3 for people in Kenya, that's already quite a bit of money. So that's your first answer, is that yes, if you ask people to pay for a Bednet, you miss out a lot. Second question, if people must get the Bednet for free, are they using them or are they wasting them? So here we have to look at among the people who got the net, are people using it when it's free, or are they using it more when they had to pay for it? And what we're finding is that the rate at which people use it is fairly high, near 100%, and it doesn't depend on the price you paid. So it doesn't seem that giving them for free leads to that much waste. And the third question is this idea of sustainability. Is it the case that if I give people their first net, they get used to the handouts and they won't want to buy anything until they can get it for free? They'll just sit on their hand and wait to get it for free. And here what we're finding is that to the extent there is any difference between the behavior of people, people who got the first Bednet for free actually are more likely to get a second one. So what seems to happen is not that Bednets, people get used to handouts, they get used to Bednets. They realize that it's actually a good thing to have, and they're more likely to get the second one. So all of this, what are we making from all of this? So first of all, it's important for policy. This is research that is immediately actionable. Before this research by Pascaline, what you had is a very big organization was distributing Bednet all over the world. It's a very good social marketing organization. They were quite convinced that people had to pay for them. So all their websites said, unless people have to pay for them, they're not going to use them, etc. As soon as they saw these results and others that are of the same kind, they removed this literature from their website, and they started providing the Bednet for free. And now if you're looking at Kenya, for example, millions and millions of Bednets are provided for free in Kenya, in Ghana, and in other countries in Africa as a direct result of the findings we have here. So there is an immediate impact of the research on people's life. It doesn't stop there, however, because you also, thanks to this result, are starting to learn something about human behavior. You're starting to learn something about some laws of human nature. Dean Ortiz was talking about the law of nature. There are also laws of human nature and our understanding of the world, what matters to people, etc. And we're starting to learn them from this. Let me give you another example along the same line. And that's another, you were seeing one of these narrower problems, which is also quite big. Why are people not getting their kids immunized? So first of all, immunization, as you might know, is by far the cheapest way to save a child's life. It really doesn't cost very much, and it protects them against a variety of diseases that you can get throughout your life. For these reasons, there is a big international effort to make immunization available to people, and in a lot of countries, it's simply free. And despite that, about 20 to 25 million of children every year go without the basic immunization. So the question is, why might that be? And then again, we can sort of try to run some little experiments that will inform us on this question. And I was involved in one of these experiments. So what we did is we worked with an NGO in Rajasthan in India, an area where the immunization rates, as you can see from this graph, were very, very low. This is full immunization, the chance that you have gotten by the age of 1, the 5 shots that you should be getting. And the rates of immunization are very, very low. So we worked with an NGO to try to improve the solution. And we thought there might be 2 ways to get at the problem. One is to make immunization easier. So to make it readily available in people's villages, once a month, very regularly, without fail. The other is to make it just a tiny bit easier by offering people a small gift in exchange of getting their kids immunized. So the gift is a kilo of lentils. A kilo of lentils is not going to convince someone who thinks immunization causes autism to go immunize their children. But if you are just a small tendency to procrastinate, it might have an impact. So here's what we find. So again, what we are doing here is the same use of randomized control trial that we saw in the case of the Bednets, which is we randomly selected villages in the area. 1/3 of the villages are control villages. We didn't do anything special, and their immunization improved a little bit, but not very much. In 1/3 of the villages randomly selected, these very regular camps were provided. Their immunization increased to 17%. That's better, almost 3 times better, but there are still many people to immunize. And in the third case, in addition, the lentils were provided, and their immunization again increased to almost 40%. What is interesting here is you can say, well, but that's not sustainable to go and provide lentils for people to get immunized. But of course, that would be a mistake, because it turns out it is cheaper to provide lentils than not to provide lentil when you immunize the child. The reason being that to immunize the child, someone needs to be there and sit there anyway. The more people she immunizes, the harder she works, so her daily wage is more effectively used. So the total cost of immunizing a child, which includes the little gifts you're giving plus the cost of the nurse, is about $20 per head for full immunization in the case of the incentive camps, and about $50 when you don't have the incentive. So here is again something that is very important to keep in the back of your mind. Most of our intuitions are wrong. Doesn't mean you shouldn't use your intuition. You have to use your intuition, but then you have to put them to the test, being a statistical test like this one, or running through a proof. Here, the intuition that, oh, if you spend more money, that's going to cost you more, turns out to be wrong. So here again, we are learning something that is useful for policy. We are working today with the government of Haryana, one of India's biggest states, to generalize this program. And you're learning something about behavior. Why are people not getting immunized? Well, it's not because they don't care about health, because nobody gets immunized, but a lot of people go to hospitals once they're sick. What these experiments tend to suggest is that there are really 2 things that are at play here. On the one hand is a lack of information about the benefits of immunization, about what it does to you. And this is not only a problem in India, of course. In these countries as well, you have some periodic outbreak of diseases because people suddenly refuse to get immunized because of some misconception. On the one hand, there is our universal tendency to procrastinate. It might not apply just to you, but you're a very selected group of people. The rest of us tend not to do today what we could possibly do tomorrow. So that universal tendency to procrastinate is fine when it's about going to the gym, maybe, but it's not that fine when it's about immunizing your kids, because you keep going and postponing until it's really too late. The 2 combined are potentially very lethal, because now you have something, immunization, which in reality has a huge benefit. But the benefit is perceived to be, okay, there's some benefit. I don't know. I don't exactly know what it does, but I'm willing to admit that it's somewhat good. But it's good is sometime in the future and uncertain, whereas the cost is right now and today of the child being a little bit sick and me spending half a day. The way we solve this problem in our country is by making immunization compulsory on a schedule. Well, but you can't do that in India, since you cannot even have your nurses go to clinic regularly. This is a sub-center, but it's closed. So you cannot really enforce compulsory immunization. So the lentil program is a way of turning the problem on its head and saying, well, this replaces, in our countries, we impose a cost if you don't get immunized. India is not capable to do that at the moment, but what it can do instead is offering a benefit if you do get immunized. That leads me to sort of one finding that we keep finding over and over, which is more a finding about attitude, which maybe you can keep in your mind. In a lot of cases, when we think about others, and in particular when we think about poor people, in poor countries, we are wondering, why aren't they boiling their water? Why aren't they immunizing their children? Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? And that's because we don't realize that the difference between them and us is not about our nature as people, it's about the environment in which we live. Our water is clean, it comes clean right from the tap. If you live in Kenya and you want water, you first have to go and pick it up, often not that far, or not that close to where you live, and then you have to come back, and then you have to boil it, really, ideally, and then you have to make sure that it doesn't sit in a dirty pot, and then you have to change the pot often enough, and then. So what we forget is that we live in a very protected environment. We live in an environment where everything has been organized to protect us against our own mistakes, against our own failures. That's the luxury of living, in a sense, in a society with some subtle paternalism around us. The poorer you are, the more responsibilities you have to take for your own life. And that is difficult. What this means is, on the one hand, you can make mistakes. But worse than that, even if you don't make mistakes, you don't have time to do math. Well, that's, you probably think that's terrible, but worse than that, you don't really have time to focus on the very important decisions. You don't have time to focus on, like, what should your kid do in life, what is important to them, what new business idea you can have, because you're so busy dealing with the day-to-day things. Hence, there is a lot of value in making things a little bit easier, making sure drinking water is available, making immunization right there, etc. And that's something that comes throughout my research. So you can think that's very, very far from math. Of course, in the background of all of that is a lot of statistics, if not very advanced mathematics. So where are we here? Where does it lead us? So you can say, well, I've taken this Earth and I exploded the problem in many, many small issues. Have I given up on the problem of one day solving the problem of world poverty? I don't think so, because I think it's through a better understanding of every single of these problems, we're getting insights that we can then transpose to something else. For example, the same type of insights about procrastination we get from the immunization work, we can then take on to very different problems. For example, why is the productivity of African agriculture so low? Well, one of the problems is that there is a very low use of fertilizer. And you can think of the problem of low use of fertilizer as a procrastination issue. So let me step back and say a little bit of what I do for a living in this context. I run a lab at MIT, which is called the Jamil Poverty Action Lab. So more than a lab, it's really a network. It's a network that is that has 5 centers in Africa, in Europe, in India, in Latin America, and here. And the objective of this center, the objective of this center is to ensure that policy is driven by evidence and research is translated into action. So it has really 3 aspects to it. First, we need to conduct rigorous research of the kind I gave you 2 examples of. Running projects such that, how much should people pay for Bednets? Running projects such that how can we increase immunization in Udaipur? Secondly, we need to convey these results to policymakers. That's the policy outreach goal that we have. So we need to talk to policymakers. So we do that through a variety of things. We have a website. We go and talk to them a lot. We produce literature. I wrote this book that was talked about, Poor Economics. All of that is to try and spread the message. And third is training others to do the same things. Of course, graduate students, undergraduate students, policymakers, many young people who are going into the field. So today, it's quite many of us. It's about 70 professors for 40 universities who are running this project. And we are running projects across many, many areas. So I gave you ideas on health, But projects are on education, rural development, finance, gender, etc. They're all united by the same method that I described, which is at the heart of it is the idea that if you want to make a rigorous comparison between people who are exposed to different types of environments, the only way to do it really is to randomly vary this environment. So if you want to know whether people would behave differently if they had to pay for Bednet, some people must pay and some people must get them for free. If they are randomly selected, there's no systematic difference between them except the randomization. So all these projects, these 344 projects we have at the moment, are united by this methodology. All of this matters in the end. This is, you are thinking, well, does it translate into helping a lot of people? That's one example, which is deworming. Oops. Deworming is something that you would think is very, sort of not very important in the world, but it turns out that in regions where intestinal worms are endemic, they are fighting with the children for the food that the children are eating. That's not very appetizing, not so long after lunch, but what this means is that these kids are anemic, and they are listless, and they can't focus very well in school. And they miss a lot of school as well. So just deworming them leads, on the one hand, to improved attendance in school. On the other hand, to better test scores once they grow up. They become better at math by taking these pills. And finally, by higher wages many years later. So because of that, we created an organization called Deworm the World, where the objective is to deworm as many children as we can. In 2009, 20 million children were dewormed. In 2011, which is, we just got the number, another maybe 25 million, including 17 is just one state in India. So we can finish with those girls, or almost finish with those girls. A lot of what I do has something to do with them. A lot of what we do has something to say, look, in a lot of cases, can we do something to help to improve their quality of life here and now, while we answer the big questions about how to eradicate poverty? In a lot of cases, we already know. And when we don't know, we kind of already know how to try and learn. And of course, there are many other ways we can learn, but we already know how to get started. So there is very little reason not to start and then come back in 50 years and say, have we made a difference by you? Are you closer to being able to sit in this room and run your math test than you would otherwise have been? And here is the one maxim by which I try to run my life, which is from Roosevelt. He was saying that in 1932, at the heart of the Great Recession, the world needs, and unless I mistake its temper, the world demands bold, persistent experimentation. It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something. The millions who are in need will not stand by silently forever, while the things to satisfy their needs are within easy reach. So this is, I think, I hope something you can keep. And I wish all of you, great luck and great sunny September afternoon. Congratulations.